Learning objectives. At the end of this topic, you will be able to cite the significance of health, enumerate about disease and its causes, explain about infectious diseases. Introduction.
We have seen that cells are the basic units of living beings. Cells are made of a variety of chemical substances, proteins, carbohydrates, fats or lipids, and so on. Although the pictures look quite static, in reality, the living cell is a dynamic place. Something or the other is always happening. Cells move from place to place. Even in cells that do not move, there is repair going on. New cells are being made. In our organs or tissues, there are various specialized activities going on. The heart is beating, the lungs are breathing, the kidney is filtering urine, the brain is thinking. Yes, all these activities are interconnected. For example, if the kidneys are not filtering urine, poisonous substances will accumulate. Under such conditions, the brain will not be able to think properly. For all these interconnected activities, energy and raw material are needed from outside the body. In other words, food is a necessity for cell and tissue functions. Anything that prevents proper functioning of cells and tissues will lead to a lack of proper activity of the body. Right. It is in this context that we will now look at the notions of health and disease.
Health and its failure. The significance of health. We have heard the word health used quite frequently all around us. We use it ourselves as well when we say things like, "My grandmother's health is not good." Our teachers use it when they scold us, saying this is not a healthy attitude. If we think about it, we realize that it always implies the idea of being well. We can think of this well-being as effective functioning. For our grandmothers, being able to go to the market or to visit neighbors is being well, and not being able to do such things is poor health. Being interested in following the teaching in the classroom so that we can understand the world is called a healthy attitude, while not being interested is called the opposite. Health is therefore a state of well-being enough to function well physically, mentally, and socially. Personal and community issues both matter for health. If health means a state of physical, mental, and social well-being, it cannot be something that each one of us can achieve entirely on our own. The health of all organisms will depend on their surroundings or their environment. The environment includes the physical environment. So, for example, health is at risk in a cyclone in many ways. But even more importantly, human beings live in societies. Our social environment, therefore, is an important factor in our individual health. If there is a great deal of garbage thrown in our streets, or if there is open rainwater lying stagnant around where we live, the possibility of poor health increases. Therefore, public cleanliness is important for individual health. We need food for health, and this food will have to be earned by doing work. For this, the opportunity to do work has to be available. Good economic conditions and jobs are therefore needed for individual health. We need to be happy in order to be truly healthy, and if we mistreat each other and are afraid of each other, we cannot be happy or healthy. Social equality and harmony are therefore necessary for individual health. We can think of many other such examples of connections between community issues and individual health. Distinctions between healthy and disease-free. The word is actually self-explanatory. We can think of it as disease, disturbed ease. Disease, in other words, literally means being uncomfortable. However, the word is used in a more limited meaning. We talk of disease when we can find a specific and particular cause of discomfort. This does not mean that we have to know the absolute final cause. We can say that someone is suffering from diarrhea without knowing exactly what has caused the loose motions. We can now easily see that it is possible to be in poor health without actually suffering from a particular disease. Simply not being diseased is not the same as being healthy. Good health for a dancer may mean being able to stretch his body into difficult but graceful positions. On the other hand, good health for a musician may mean having enough breathing capacity in his or her lungs to control the notes from his or her flute. To have the opportunity to realize the unique potential in all of us is also necessary for real health. So, we can be in poor health without there being a simple cause in the form of an identifiable disease. This is the reason why, when we think about health, we think about societies and communities. On the other hand, when we think about disease, we think about individual sufferers. Disease and its causes. What does disease look like? The tissues make up physiological systems or organ systems that carry out body functions. Each of the organ systems has specific organs as its parts, and it has particular functions. So, the digestive system has the stomach and intestines, and it helps to digest food taken in from outside the body. The musculoskeletal system, which is made up of bones and muscles, holds the body parts together and helps the body move. When there is a disease, either the functioning or the appearance of one or more systems of the body will change for the worse. These changes give rise to symptoms and signs of disease. Symptoms of disease are the things we feel as being wrong. So, we have a headache, we have cough, we have loose motions, we have a wound from pus. These are all symptoms. These indicate there may be a disease, but they don't indicate what the disease is. For example, a headache may mean just examination stress, or very rarely it may mean meningitis, or any one of a dozen different diseases. Signs will give a little more definite indication of the presence of a particular disease. Acute and chronic diseases. The manifestations of diseases will be different depending on a number of factors. One of the most obvious factors that determine how we perceive the disease is its duration. Some diseases last for only very short periods of time, and these are called acute diseases. We all know from experience that common cold lasts only a few days. Other ailments can last for a long time, even as much as a lifetime, and are called chronic diseases. An example is the infection called elephantiasis, which is very common in some parts of India. Any disease that causes poor functioning of some part of the body will affect our general health as well. This is because all functions of the body are necessary for general health. But an acute disease, which is over very soon, will not have time to cause major effects on general health, while a chronic disease will do so. Let's look at differences between acute and chronic disease. When we think about causes of diseases, we must remember that there are many levels of such causes. Let us look at an example. If there is a baby suffering from loose motions, we can say that the cause of loose motion is an infection with a virus. So the immediate cause of the disease is a virus. Let's analyze where this virus came from. Suppose we find the virus came through unclean drinking water. But many babies must have had this unclean drinking water. One reason might be that this baby is not healthy. As a result, it might be more likely to have disease when exposed to risk, whereas healthier babies would not. This might be it is not well nourished and does not get enough food. So lack of good nourishment becomes a second-level cause of the disease the baby is suffering from. This might be perhaps because it is from a household which is poor. It is also possible that this baby has some genetic difference that makes it more likely to suffer from loose motions when exposed to such a virus. Without the virus, the genetic difference or the poor nourishment alone would not lead to loose motions. But they do become contributory causes of the disease. It will now be obvious that all diseases will have immediate causes and contributory causes. Also, most diseases will have many causes rather than one single cause. As we have seen, It is important to keep public health and community health factors in mind when we think about the causes of diseases. We can take that approach a little further. It is useful to think of the immediate causes of disease as belonging to two distinct types. One group of cause is the infectious agents, mostly microbes or microorganisms. Diseases where microbes are the immediate causes are called infectious diseases. This is because the microbes can spread in the community and the disease they cause will spread with them. On the other hand, there are also diseases that are not caused by infectious agents. Their causes vary, but they are not external causes like microbes that can spread in the community. Instead, these are mostly internal, non-infectious causes. For example, some cancers are caused by genetic abnormalities. High blood pressure can be caused by excessive weight and lack of exercise. The ways in which diseases spread and the ways in which they can be treated and prevented at the community level would be different for different diseases. This would depend a lot on whether the immediate causes are infectious or non-infectious. Infectious diseases. Infectious agents. We have seen that the entire diversity seen in the living world can be classified into a few groups. This classification is based on common characteristics between different organisms. Organisms that can cause disease are found in a wide range of such categories of classification. Some of them are viruses, some are bacteria, some are fungi, some are single-celled animals or protozoans. Some diseases are also caused by multicellular organisms, such as worms of different kinds. Common examples of diseases caused by viruses are common cold, influenza, dengue fever, and AIDS. Diseases like typhoid fever, cholera, tuberculosis, and anthrax are caused by bacteria. Many common skin infections are caused by different kinds of fungi. Protozoan microbes cause many familiar diseases such as malaria and kala-azar. All of us have also come across intestinal worm infections as well as diseases like elephantiasis caused by different species of worms. These categories are important factors in deciding what kind of treatment to use. Members of each one of these groups, viruses, bacteria, and so on, have many biological characteristics in common. All viruses, for example, live inside the host cell, whereas bacteria very rarely do. Viruses, bacteria, and fungi multiply very quickly, while worms multiply very slowly in comparison. Taxonomically, all bacteria are closely related to each other than to viruses and vice versa. This means that many important life processes are similar in the bacteria group but are not shared with the virus group. As a result, drugs that block one of these life processes in one member of the group is likely to be effective against many other members of the group. But the same drug will not work against a microbe belonging to a different group. As an example, let us take antibiotics. They commonly block biochemical pathways important for bacteria. Many bacteria, for example, make a cell wall to protect themselves. The antibiotic penicillin blocks the bacterial processes that build the cell wall. As a result, the growing bacteria becomes unable to make cell walls and die easily. Human cells don't make a cell wall anyway, so penicillin cannot have such an effect on us. Penicillin will have this effect on any bacteria that use such processes for making cell walls. Similarly, many antibiotics work against many species of bacteria rather than simply working against one. But viruses do not use these pathways at all, and that is the reason why antibiotics do not work against viral infections. If we have a common cold, taking antibiotics does not reduce the severity or the duration of the disease. However, if we also get a bacterial infection along with a viral cold, taking antibiotics will help. Even then, the antibiotics will work only against the bacterial part of the infection, not the viral infection. Means of spread. Many microbial agents can commonly move from an affected person to someone else in a variety of ways. In other words, they can be communicated and are so also called communicable diseases. Such disease-causing microbes can spread through the air. This occurs through the little droplets thrown out by an infected person who sneezes or coughs. Someone standing close by can breathe in these droplets, and the microbes get a chance to start a new infection. Examples of such diseases spread through the air are common cold, pneumonia, and tuberculosis. Diseases can also be spread through water. This occurs if the excreta from someone suffering from an infectious gut disease, such as cholera, gets mixed with the drinking water used by people living nearby. The cholera-causing microbes will enter new hosts through the water they drink and cause diseases in them. Such diseases are much more likely to spread in the absence of safe supplies of drinking water. The sexual act is one of the closest physical contacts two people can have with each other. AIDS are transmitted by sexual contact from one partner to the other. However, such sexually transmitted diseases are not spread by casual physical contact. Casual physical contacts include handshakes or hugs or sports like wrestling or by any other way in which we touch each other socially. Other than the sexual contact, the AIDS virus can also spread through blood-to-blood contact with the infected person or from the infected mother to her baby during pregnancy or through breastfeeding. We live in an environment that is full of many other creatures apart from us. It is inevitable that many diseases will be transmitted by other animals. These animals carry the infecting agents from a sick person to another potential host. These animals are thus the intermediaries and are called vectors. The commonest vectors we all know are mosquitoes. In many species of mosquitoes, the females need highly nutritious food in the form of blood in order to be able to lay mature eggs. Mosquitoes feed on many warm-blooded animals, including us. In this way, they can transfer disease from person to person. Organ-specific and tissue-specific manifestations. The body is very large when compared to the microbes. So there are many possible places, organs or tissues where they could go. If they enter from the air via the nose, they are likely to go to the lungs. This is seen in the bacteria causing tuberculosis. If they enter through the mouth, they can stay in the gut lining, like typhoid causing bacteria. Or they can go to the liver, like the viruses that cause jaundice. An infection like HIV that comes into the body via the sexual organs will spread to lymph nodes all over the body. Malaria causing microbes entering a mosquito bite. Entering through a mosquito bite will go to the liver and then to the red blood cells. The signs and symptoms of a disease will thus depend on the tissue or organ which the microbe targets. If the lungs are the targets, then symptoms will be cough and breathlessness. If the liver is targeted, there will be jaundice. If the brain is the target, we will observe headaches, vomiting, fits, or unconsciousness. We can imagine what the symptoms and signs of an infection will be if we know what the target tissue or organ is and the functions that are carried out by this tissue or organ. In addition to these tissue-specific effects of infectious disease, there will be other common effects too. Most of the common effects depend on the fact that the body's immune system is activated in response to the infection. An active immune system recruits many cells to the affected tissue to kill off the disease-causing microbes. This recruitment process is called inflammation. As a part of this process, there are local effects such as swelling and pain, and general effects such as fever. In some cases, the tissue specificity of the infection leads to very general seeming effects. For example, in HIV infection, the virus goes to the immune system and damages its function. Thus, many of the effects of HIV/AIDS are because the body can no longer fight off the many minor infections that we face every day. Instead, every small cold can become pneumonia. Similarly, a minor gut infection can produce major diarrhea with blood loss. Ultimately, it is these other infections that kill people suffering from HIV/AIDS. It is also important to remember that the severity of disease manifestations depends on the number of microbes in the body. If the number of microbes is very small, the disease manifestations may be minor or unnoticed. But if the number of the microbe is large, the disease can be severe enough to be life-threatening. The immune system is a major factor that determines the number of microbes surviving in the body. Principles of treatment. Based on what we have learned so far, it would appear there are two ways to treat an infectious disease. One would be to reduce the effect of the disease, and the other is to kill the cause of the disease. For the first, we can provide treatment that will reduce the symptoms. The symptoms are usually because of the inflammation. For example, we can take medicines that bring down fever, reduce pain, or loose motions. We can take bed rest so that we can conserve our energy. This will enable us to have more of it available to focus on healing. One way is to use medicines that kill microbes. We have seen earlier that microbes can be classified into viruses, bacteria, fungi, or protozoa. Each of these groups of organisms will have some essential biochemical life process which is peculiar to that group and not shared with the other groups. These processes may be pathways for the synthesis of new substances or respiration. These pathways will not be used by us either. For example, our cells may make new substances by a mechanism different from that used by the bacteria. We have to find a drug that blocks the bacterial synthesis pathway without affecting our own. This is what is achieved by the antibiotics that we are all familiar with. Similarly, there are drugs that kill protozoa, such as the malarial parasite. One reason why making antiviral medicines is harder than making antibacterial medicines is that viruses have few biochemical mechanisms of their own. They enter our cells and use our machinery for their life processes. This means there are relatively few virus-specific targets to aim at. Despite this limitation, there are now effective antiviral drugs, for example, the drugs that keep HIV infection under control. Principles of prevention. There are three limitations of this approach to dealing with infectious disease. The first is that once someone has a disease, their body functions are damaged and may never recover completely. The second is that treatment will take time, which means someone suffering from a disease is likely to be bedridden for some time, even if we can give proper treatment. The third is that the person suffering from an infectious disease can serve as the source from where the infection may spread to other people. This leads to the multiplication of the above difficulties. It is because of such reasons that prevention of diseases is better than their cure. There are two ways to prevent diseases, one general and one specific to each disease. The general ways of preventing infections mostly relate to preventing exposure. If we look at the means of their spreading, we can get an answer as to how to prevent exposure to infectious microbes. For airborne microbes, we can prevent exposure by providing living conditions that are not overcrowded. For waterborne microbes, we can prevent exposure by providing safe drinking water. This can be done by treating the water to kill any microbial contamination. For vector-borne infections, we can provide clean environments. This would not, for example, allow mosquito breeding. In other words, public hygiene is one basic key to the prevention of infectious diseases. In addition to these issues that relate to the environment, there are some other general principles to prevent infectious diseases. Normally, we're faced with infections every day. If someone is suffering from a cold and a cough in a class, it is likely that the children sitting around will be exposed to the infection. This is because of the immune system of our body normally trying to fight off the microbes. We have cells that specialize in killing infecting microbes. These cells go into action each time infecting microbes enter the body. If they're successful, we do not actually come down with any disease. The immune cells manage to kill off the infection long before it assumes major proportions. As we noted earlier, if the number of infecting microbes is controlled, the manifestations of the disease will be minor. In other words, becoming exposed to or infected with an infectious microbe does not necessarily mean developing noticeable disease. One way of looking at severe infectious disease is that it represents a lack of success of the immune system. The functioning of the immune system, like any other system in our body, will not be good if proper and sufficient nourishment and food is not available. Therefore, the second basic principle of prevention of infectious disease is the availability of proper and sufficient food for everyone. The specific ways of preventing infections relate to a peculiar property of the immune system that usually fights off microbial infections. Let us cite an example to try and understand this property. These days, there is no smallpox anywhere in the world, but as recently as 100 years ago, smallpox epidemics were not at all uncommon. In such an epidemic, people used to be very afraid of coming near someone suffering from the disease since they were afraid of catching the disease. However, there was one group of people who did not have this fear. These people would provide nursing care for the victims of smallpox. This was a group of people who had had smallpox earlier and survived it, although with a lot of scarring. In other words, if you had smallpox once, there was no chance of suffering from it again. So having the disease once was a means of preventing subsequent attacks of the same disease. This happens because when the immune system first sees an infectious microbe, it responds against it and then remembers it specifically. So the next time that particular microbe or its close relatives enter the body, the immune system responds with even greater vigor. This eliminates the infection even more quickly than the first time around. This is the basis of the principle of vaccination that has come into our usage. We can now see that as a general principle, we can fool the immune system into developing a memory for a particular infection by putting something that mimics the microbe we want to vaccinate against into the body. This does not actually cause the disease, but this would prevent any subsequent exposure to the infecting microbe from turning into actual disease. Many such vaccines are now available for preventing a whole range of infectious diseases and provide a disease-specific means of prevention. There are vaccines against tetanus, diphtheria, whooping cough, measles, polio, and many others. These form the public health program of childhood. Let's summarize the topic. The health of an organism depends on their surroundings. Each of the human organ systems has specific organs as its parts and it has particular functions. Diseases that cause poor performance of part of the body will affect the general health. Infectious diseases are wherein microbes are immediate cause.